So we've been starting the show off by getting into a bit of a roundtable discussion. So each week I will put out a theme to just generate some general discussion about the concept as it pertains to reality television. This week, Dylan suggested this idea of authorship and how
Mhm.
that relates to reality TV. Dylan, since you suggested this topic, I thought you'd be the best person to sort of lead off that discussion.
Yeah, I really like the idea of authorship in reality TV. Like, I would have liked to bring it up anyways, regardless of current events, just because I think it's really interesting to look at reality TV as an art form that's at least generally seen to like not have an author, to just be something that's created by a team, and not like have like one uh, visionary guiding voice behind it. But then it's kind of got uh, there's different weight to the subject now because there's a writer strike going on.
Hmm.
And in our previous episode, actually, Comrade Britt brought this up, kind of jumping the gun a little bit about how there is a complex relationship between reality TV and writer strikes, because the genre really blossomed in the 2007 writers' strike, when it was used. These shows were used as a substitute for scripted TV while
Hmm.
the writers were on strike, so they're almost used as like scab shows, uh, and
Yeah.
uh, and that really helped reality TV take off. But it left it with that kind of tarnished reputation as both like cheap authorless content, and also like almost as anti-labor content, because it was used as something to break a strike with. Um, but just the idea of authorship, I think, gets thrown into question in an interesting way in reality TV. I would like to like really quickly introduce like a dollop of critical theory into the discussion really quickly.
Yeah.
Just the idea of death of the author, which is
Hmm.
probably a term you guys know, but maybe people have heard, but don't really know what it means too much, which is the idea that we get from an essay by Roland Barthes in 1967, I think, where Barthes uh, presents the proper modern way to him of reading an artwork, in contrast to the traditional way of reading an artwork, which is about trying to uncover the true meaning being what the author's intention was.
Mm.
And Bart says to the author, "No, eat my shorts. I don't care about your true intention. The truth of a work of art isn't found at its point of origin, it's found at its destination. It's the relationship between the viewer and the work of art that creates the meaning. And whatever the author might have intended is completely irrelevant. The author's erasing themselves when they make a work of art." And I think that's had a huge impact on the way that people view art since, in the 50 odd years since. And what's interesting about reality TV is we have a form that's, you don't have to kind of try to pretend there's no author to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do. That's what's, I think, interesting about it. Like, are we just ignoring the existence of the people actually making the show, or is it really a form that's almost like Roland Barthes' perfect art form that doesn't have a guiding creative voice behind it, that you can just engage with the different layers and the different meanings in the sense of like pure interpretation, without having to even try to ignore a person who created it, because there isn't someone behind the emerald curtain that's like pulling the levers. There isn't one singular person, anyways. And I think, going back to the 2007 writer strike, I think one of the impacts of it too was also stronger bifurcation in television, where you got it divided into like what's generally seen as like lower class and upper class TV,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
prestige TV just became like more of a thing,
Hmm.
and these shows were seen as like very like authored shows, and like, there's kind of the rise of the celebrity showrunner after that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, whether you're talking about like David Chase or Shonda Rhimes or whatever.
Yeah.
But then on the other end, more and more reality TV content, which really took off again as kind of a strike breaking measure, ended up getting segregated into this kind of authorless, viewed as lower class, more disreputable category.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like you're absolutely right, and that was the first thing that came to mind when you brought up this topic was the fact that in like film and prestige television, the production like tradecraft I think gets lost, or the attribution of it gets lost in those mediums in a way that it doesn't really in reality TV, because you're forced to, you don't have like a marquee director or showrunner
Mm-hmm.
or writer that you can attribute, the talent of a cinematographer or editor to. Um, you have to look at those things, take them on face value, and be like, oh wow, I can see the hand of the editor here. I can see the hand
Mhm.
of the producer here constructing these situations and driving the story in ways that would otherwise be attributed to whoever the marquee name is that is
Right.
associated with you know this piece of work being their um, their work.
Yeah, yeah, and but the thing that's interesting to me, especially now that we're back into a writer's strike and we have to think about these things, is that normally my instinct would be to really celebrate reality TV for appearing authorless, because I really like the death of the author idea, that I think it really frees the viewer up to engage with art in a much more dynamic way than they would if they felt like they had to think about original intentions. But it kind of gets concretized at a moment like this, when you have to think about the real people behind it. And then I start to wonder, well, are we looking at it as a form with no author because we've been trained to see the people making these shows as an exploitable class, unlike the unionized writers who make scripted content,
Right.
which and this is again a point that that Britt made in the previous episode, that there's a lot of union work behind scripted TV and very little union work behind reality TV. And if we really embrace the idea of it being something without authors, are we just playing into the game of continuing to exploit the actual creative, talented people behind these shows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like reality TV has a very like it is just by nature very exploitative. Like we are exploiting people's like personality disorders by watching and enjoying these shows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's already, at least um you have to accept, you have to be ignorant or accept having some blood on your hands while you're watching these. Like this is,
Sure.
it is like a blood sport.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting that it forces this idea of death of an author, which I think is actually something that reduces the barrier of entry to like consuming art and engaging with art, because I think if you are taking the approach where you're trying to like deduce a artist's true like intentions behind their work, that to do that effectively, it requires a lot of like education and context, which
Mm-hmm.
the working class typically has not had. And I think that by allowing people to kind of project their own experiences and really dive into how they relate to the material. That's way more accessible, and it opens up art to the masses. And like engaging with art is a very like valuable thing for just part of the human experience, and so making
Mhm.
it easier for people to do that and not associating like any sort of like shame or like a right or wrong to
Mm-hmm.
how people interpret that, I think that's very valuable. And I think that especially when we've got this movement of prestige TV, which it is like creating a lot of like fantastic television, there is a sort of elitistness that is
Mm-hmm.
associated with that. And
Yeah.
if you don't like I don't even know what the hottest prestige TV show is right now.
Succession.
Succession, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you don't appreciate Succession,
Mm-hmm.
like just
Yeah.
you're gonna
Yeah.
turn my nose up to you, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Well, and it's funny too, because it's like especially watching some aspects of some of these shows, like the family drama, the family dynamics that they're playing out in like Real Housewives of New Jersey is like they're hitting a lot of the same beats as Succession. It's
Sure.
just,
Yeah.
it's just done in a different way, and you're not thinking about it in terms of like, oh, how is this playing back to, what happened seasons before. It's just raw, and like they're just expressing exactly what they're feeling in that moment, or you know what I mean, like they're obviously heightened for the fact everyone no one's not aware that they're on TV,
Right.
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I had like kind of noted that I thought was interesting, and I think there is a distinction between like authorship and attribution, but there
Mhm.
is this like human need to try to attribute things to people. So even
Mhm.
on a medium that is authorless, um, the fans do seek out to kind of like find someone that they can attribute the work to, and I think like on Bravo shows, that's typically like Andy Cohen kind of fills that role as being like
Sure.
this like godfather of
Right.
Real Housewives and all like Bravo reality TV content. Um, which I find like really interesting because yeah, like it is authorless and he probably has some say in terms of like at a high executive level, but certainly not in a way that would influence like the storytelling notes, like down to the nuances of the edit that.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not like a strong attribution. Like I don't think people see Andy Cohen as an author, but they do like look to someone to like to herald for
Mhm.
the
Sure.
successes.
Sure.
Um,
And he's put himself in that position to kind of be that guy, right? Just by being such a
yeah,
public facing persona. Um, I feel like he puts himself forward as like, I will be the face of the people behind the show.
Mhm.
Yeah, and not that that's entirely like selfless, but um, part of that probably is seeing the need to have some sort of
Mhm.
like coalescing entity for the fans to really rally around. Because I think like yes, as a work of art or a cultural work, uh, Real Housewives and other reality Bravo reality shows are a very like strong entity. But one thing that I don't think gets talked about a lot is like it has a very like fervent and active and rabid and engaged fan base that I don't think
Oh yeah.
people think of. Like if you think of like strong fandoms of like works of art, you think like Trekkies, you think
Mhm.
Star Wars, you think Marvel, but Bravo is huge. Like there's a huge segment of the population that engages with these very, very like actively and rapidly. Um, that is just that has been built partly because Andy Cohen has become this figurehead um, for being the author of these works.
Mhm. I mean, it feels to me, and like this is coming out, from being the outsider, but it seems more like a guiding, and not one voice, but like, through the edits, through the story producers asking the questions, like it's guiding the story, but it doesn't feel like there's hard decisions being made ahead of time or anything like that. Like it guides the story
Mhm.
by necessity, not by authorship in that way.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the storytelling that production has is it's very like reactive. Like
Hmm.
they're reacting to circumstances and trying to you know figure out ways to position the story to move forward in a
Hmm.
direction that is interesting or dynamic or kind of does what they want. They'll at times you can see a more heavy hand of them, introducing information in a way that is kind of obviously producers, like if they bring on a psychic or a life coach is one that we saw like introduced. I don't think that was like there was any narrative value in what we saw in Real Housewives of Atlanta in this case. But as soon as the
Or
life
like-
coach came on, I was like, oh, they are seeding a storyline here
Yeah,
right
Sure.
away.
Or like, let's all play a game. The game's called Everybody Insults Each Other.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think if you're trying to find like somebody behind the camera who's really responsible for creating a lot of the things we love about the show, one thing that's interesting about reality TV is a lot of that is going to end up in the editing room too. Instead of it being a medium that's created in the writers' room or created on set by a director, a lot of the narratives are clearly being excavated from the edit. So it's almost a bit of an editor as author medium in that sense too, or you could at least look at it that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it just goes back to documentary film too, where it's created, like you said, written in the editing room.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, when we think about authorship and we think about, Bravo reality shows in broad strokes, the first thing that comes to mind is like stories, because there's really, dynamic big stories. But one thing that will sometimes get lost is like any like good piece of narrative has very strong characters. And the strengths of a lot of these shows are also built on the back of great casting and great personalities that they build their characters. They like take pieces of themselves and exaggerate them, and like look for archetypes to to fit into the story and kind of to navigate the social situations. And then they know when a good time to break those molds are. And they've just, a really great housewife or a cast member on Vanderpump Rules, they have a keen instinct for when is a good time to like hold on to information, like retain it, and when's a good time to use it, how it should be dispersed, like, and like having a little bit of foresight if they are, kind of filling a strategic role, having the foresight to know, if I tell this person this is how it's going to move around through this circle. So I think that there's like a lot of credit does need to be, put on the cast as well for
sure.
being authors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel that that's instinct that is learned after years of being a part of this medium, or is that something that's innate to those cast members? Or both?
I think it's both. In some cases, there's people that just like naturally have the ability to do that. That's just like part of their character. I think some of it comes like learned from watching these shows ahead of time and kind of seeing how they work. And uh, one thing that is like really interesting to see is when you've got a season where you've got a new cast member or multiple new cast members, especially on like Real Housewives, watching them learn it. Because I think that's been one of the interesting things about Real Housewives of New Jersey this season. We've got two brand new housewives that are trying to learn the ropes. And I think one is like just hit the ground running and like immediately seemed like a seasoned vet, and the other is like fumbling a bit more. Sometimes it'll take someone like 2 seasons to get it. Usually they won't get like a third season if they're really not engaging. But yeah, I think like it varies from person to person in terms of how quickly they will kind of pick up on the game.
Who are the new ones on New Jersey? I can't even pick it out.
Guess.
Yeah.
Wow. Now I have to remember names.
That's always the hard part for a first timer.
What was the name? The woman in the first scene with her mom, Marge Senior, and the two twin moms.
Okay.
What was her name?
Yeah,
was
Jen
she
Fessler.
Jen Fessler.
Yeah, so she is new, but she's not a full blown cast member. She's a like friend of.
Yeah.
So there's tiers to the casts. So there's Housewives, which is kind of your main like character, and then there's friend of, which is like a heightened guest role.
Okay.
And that like the friend can be like almost a full blown housewife.
Sure,
it kind of depends, but often they just won't get their like personal outside of the like friend circle highlighted, but they can
Mhm.
have a very active role in storytelling. And then there's like the guest, which is like 1 or 2 appearances in a season.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I don't know who the other one is. I have no idea.
So Danielle is a new one,
Oh,
and
okay.
she has like hit the ground running,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And
Mhm.
Rachel Fuda, who I think is actually at the beginning of the season, I was like, oh, I don't know, I think she's going to be a 1 season wonder, but she's grown on me in terms of like her ability to operate within the housewife sphere. So
Wow. I'm shocked
Mm.
that Rachel is new. Having watched this episode, she seems to be like have a fully fleshed out storyline.
Yeah, this episode and the previous one, they've really been building her story more than
Yeah.
they had until this point. Yeah.
yeah. Do you guys have any other thoughts on authorship?
No, I think that's enough critical theory for one
Yeah.
Bravo podcast.
Okay, I had a couple more points, but
Go. Yeah. Don't let me hold
no,
you back.
I think we've got a lot to get through. The one thing that I did want to bring up though was these books that Housewives write, like that are
Oh, okay.
undoubtedly ghost written by
Yeah.
someone.
Come on, let's
make
go. Give me some titles. Well, I want to hear more.
well, okay, so given the shows that we have watched, Rory, who do you
Mhm.
think would be a New York Times bestseller of
Oh
the Housewives?
God. Lisa Vanderpump.
Okay, I'm not sure if Lisa is.
Really? Man, past that, it's honestly a crapshoot. I'd just be like firing shots into the air, hoping to hit something. I have no idea.
Teresa Giudice is like a multiple-time New York Times bestseller.
Wow.
Which is like, obviously she didn't write these books. Like she
Yeah.
is
What? I'm returning all these editions, all these signed editions I've got back here.
But yeah, like these are extensions of their character. I think
Right.
that like, they still have a hand in shaping these, and
Mhm.
I think that it goes again. Maybe this speaks a bit more to fandom than actual authorship, but that these are kind of tools that are used by the housewives to further their characters and engage with fans and build their backstory. And I do think, if you're looking, I think there's kind of 2 ways that you can look at authorship, or 2 like levels. You can look at authorship of like the show, or maybe even down to an episode level, but
Mhm.
then a more broad like sense of authorship of the world, like a world builder. And these housewives are definitely very active in the world building, because they're creating supplemental works like
Right.
these books, and also
They're all George's Lucas's.
Yeah.
They're creating books, and they're creating like music to kind of like build and fill this world. And
Mhm.
I do think that we do need to attribute maybe more authorship to these housewives or the cast members
Sure,
than
yeah.
we do.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's makes me remember something too, like how much of the drama on Atlanta specifically took place in the social media sphere that they're referencing. That it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like they are authoring this drama between seasons, where it's like they're giving themselves storylines and conflict to hit the ground running in the first episode. That they're creating outside of even being on on this show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things that you'll hear from various housewives is, what you don't realize is that there's like 3 seasons of housewives. Like there's are 3 phases to a season.
Yeah.
There's while you're shooting the season and
Mhm.
engaging in the drama, and then there's when it's airing and it's playing back, and you're engaging with it on social media with the fan base and firing shots at each other.
Yeah.
And then there's also the lull, the lead up to a new season, when everyone's getting kind of ramped up and like firing shots to sort of seed the storylines for the next
Mhm.
season.
So are you telling me that Give Them Lala isn't a New York Times bestseller?
Oh, you know what? It probably is.
Better be. I've bought enough copies.
But so I guess the New York Times publishers know how to game the New York Times bestseller, and so what they'll do is they'll do like bulk orders of the book. Like the publishers themselves will buy enough books to make up the gap between what they think it's going to be distributed as and what it takes to get on the bestsellers list. So I think like there's a lot of authors, not just like on reality TV, but that will use this system and like basically pay to be a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, sure. I mean, you go to like an airport and look at the books that you're selling, and you're like, how are every single one of you a New York Times bestseller? How does this happen?
Awesome.